1,90,000 Indians are going to be brought back from around the world. Air India and the Indian Navy are deploying their assets to do this, but it will take time, and the passengers are being charged at commercial rates. A very conservative estimate is that by the end of this round of evacuations, India will have evacuated at least 1,90,000 people, but that number could actually go up because the number of citizens who want to actually come back home from the Gulf is upwards of 2 lakhs. So these are the flights that Air India is actually operating, lots of flights, and they're going to operate flights for a period of 1 week, figure out what they need to do to step up their flights. The flights are going to be all over the world, the United States, they're going to be in the Philippines, they're going to be in the Middle East, they're going to be in Singapore, Bangladesh, several other countries, of course the United Kingdom as well. Now all of these flights will be taking Indian citizens largely to Kerala, to Maharashtra, to Tamil Nadu, to Bengaluru and a few other locations, Delhi of course. And so all Indian citizens who've registered with an Indian consulate or a high commission or an embassy are placed in a list, and those who have an urgent need or a more urgent need to actually come back, they are being allowed back. I should also tell you that the flights which are going out are also taking a couple of those citizens, Indians and others, who want to get back to their countries, perhaps because they work or for other reasons. Now the Indian Navy is involved in these operations as well. 3 Indian Navy ships at least. We are told a 4th one is going to actually start operating as well. They are operating at the moment into the Maldives. 2 ships in the Maldives, but they will quickly be mission deployed to move to the Middle East, and we are told that it's the port of Dubai that they are going to be actually going to. The largest of the ships, INS Jalashwa, usually takes 1,000 passengers, but because of social distancing will get less than 500 passengers. The other 2 ships would be about 300, so they'll keep going back and forth. More ships can be added if necessary. Let's just listen in to what the Civil Aviation Minister Hardeep Puri had to say about these operations.
I spent 40 years in another profession called diplomacy, and I've gone through many evacuation programs in my long 4 decades there. But I think this is easily the most comprehensive and complicated and challenging evacuation plans.
Well, there are lots of government standard operating procedures which have just been released in the last little while, which actually explain how all of this is going to work out. So I'm going to read what exactly these government standard operating procedures actually are. So, so the government has actually spelled it out. And the big point here is, due to their prolonged stay abroad, these individuals are facing distress and are desirous of returning to India urgently. Apart from the medical cases, there are other Indian nationals who need to visit India in medical emergencies or the death of a family member. So these individuals are the ones who are being allowed to travel first, but ultimately the numbers could be very big. In order to facilitate the movement of such Indian nationals, the following standard operating procedures have been laid down. And I'm just going to go through these standard operating procedures. Such persons will register themselves with the Indian missions in the country where they are stranded, along with necessary details as prescribed by the External Affairs Ministry. They will travel to India by non-scheduled commercial flights to be arranged by the Ministry of Civil Aviation, and Navy ships will be arranged by the Department of Military Affairs. Priority will be given to compelling cases in distress. Now this is absolutely important, including migrant workers and laborers who've been laid off, short-term visa holders faced with an expiry of visas. The cost of travel as specified by the government will be borne by these travellers. We've already mentioned what exactly the prices are over there. It's 50,000 rupees from Europe and 1 lakh rupees returned from the United States. Based on registrations received, the External Affairs Ministry will prepare a flight and ship, and passengers will be told in advance where to report. The External Affairs Ministry will designate states and union territory nodal officers. They will be coordinating. The External Affairs Ministry will display at least 2 days in advance where these flights are taking place. Let's scroll to the next page if we can, so that I can go through a few more of these points, because the next set of points are important. Before boarding, all passengers shall give an undertaking that they would undergo mandatory institutional quarantine for a minimum period of 14 days. So they have to be quarantined on coming in over here. All travelers have to be required to give an undertaking that they are making the journey at their own risk. At the time of boarding, the External Affairs Ministry will facilitate the thermal scanning of passengers as per the health protocol. Only asymptomatic travelers will be allowed to board the flight. Passengers arriving through land borders will have to undergo the same procedure, and there will be self-declaration forms and many other details as well. So those are some of the guidelines that actually need to be followed. But let's now take a look at some of the reactions that we can actually get. And I'm told we are joined by a couple of students as well. Thank you all very much for joining me. These are students who are actually abroad, and the student from Singapore. Let me start with you. When did you find out that you would now have an opportunity to actually come back to India, and are you relieved because were you desperate to come back?
Hi Vishnu, thanks so much for having me. As you said, there was a huge sigh of relief for a lot of people here. I study in Singapore at the National University of Singapore, and we've been waiting actually for an upwards of 30 to 40 days to hear back from the High Commission. And I think today was a great day for a lot of us because we finally know that there's some plan in motion, and just fingers crossed that we are able to go back soon.
Sudhanshu, where are you based now, and how difficult were the last several weeks? You wanted to come back to this country. Give us a sense of what you're feeling now.
Vishnu, I'm based in New York City, and I'm one of the privileged ones who had a place to stay with his brother here in New York and could, shelter at home. But again, we have over 250,000 Indian students studying in any given year in the United States, and many of them don't have that accommodation because they were kicked out of their homes. They don't have food to eat. So while I was privileged enough, there are an exorbitant amount of Indian students who are not lucky. And the new orders, while they're compelling and comforting, we need to understand they're a little too late. There's not enough flights to get these students who are in desperate need. I shared photos. People are living in open garages because they've been kicked out with all their stuff in trashes. This is all very compelling stuff, and no assistance from the United States or the Indian government. And we need to be aware of this.
This is an important point, Sudhanshu. Why are several of these Indian students in the condition that you say they're in? Have they been thrown out from the places where they were studying? On what basis could any institution do that?
Okay, so we have to break it down, right? So one, you have F1 typical student visa holders, right? They are the students that come here for the 4-year, 2-year programs to study. Some of them, yes, completely are middle class and above, and those that could have afforded it have already left the country, right? We're concerned about specifically some of the F1 students who couldn't afford because they're on scholarships at community and state local colleges.
Right.
And second of all, A1 student visas, right? We're completely disregarding the fact that these students work on minimum paying jobs, and those jobs have been stopped. So in terms of the students, they were kicked out of their apartment, their hostels or where they live because the universities have shut down or gone online. The students were kicked out because landlords are, kicking people out. They're not following the moratoriums that are set, but they've also lost jobs, so they can't pay the rent. Or if they pay the rent, they don't have enough, rent to pay they don't have enough to pay for food. Mm-hmm. So a limited amount of funds available, and these students again work on day to day, and they're actually here to send money back home. And this is a huge issue that we're seeing is when we're approaching communities, they're saying, they're well off enough to study here. What are they doing? But the students that have been most affected, again, are low-income students who have come here to study. And then second of all, J1 student visa holders, which is an important distinction to make.
Right. That's lots of critical points over there. Anjali, you're a student at the University of Central Oklahoma. Just tell us how difficult it's been for you in the last few months. Where is your family based in India?
My family is in Vadodara, Gujarat, actually, and since past a month or so.
And have you applied, Anjali, for a ticket? Have you tried to purchase a ticket on these flights? Have you put in your name with the Indian Consul General?
Yes, I have.
General,
Since last March, I actually paid for a flight to go back home, but it was canceled due to the international ban, and I have been trying again and again, but due to the international ban, I could not. And I actually did apply for the evacuation flight that's going to be happening soon, but we have not received any confirmation, so I'm still not sure right now.
Can you tell us, Anjali, how difficult it was for your family back home in India to not know when they're going to see you next?
Well, it's definitely has been difficult because like every parent, they are sending their child away like 8,000 miles away. And as the days are passing by, the threatening nature of this pandemic is multiplying exponentially. And God forbid if we get sick or get infected, we don't have the proper living situation or financial support or even emotional support as such to survive.
Noopur, how difficult has it been in Singapore? Because there was a sense that Singapore was right on top of the battle, and then all of a sudden there was a fresh spurt of cases, which became a huge cause of concern. What impact did that have on you as a student?
Right. So I think we were one of the first countries to completely stop gatherings and classes and all. So we have actually gone completely online in terms of classes and interaction since February, which is actually 3 months before. And because of that, I think, and after the circuit breaker that Singapore has imposed, we literally cannot go out except for essentials.
Yeah.
And I think that has been like mentally extremely tormenting for a lot of us, because I mean, we do feel safe because our university is not actually telling us to leave, even though it has encouraged us to go back. And a lot of students are going back to their countries, and I think that has added to the anxiety that when will our turn come.
Yeah. Sudhanshu, you described to us a lot of Indian students in a terrible condition right now financially. Now it's 1 lakh rupees to get back to India, right? That's the cost of the ticket. That's what Air India will be charging. Could there be situations when some of these students may not even be able to pay that?
No, of course not. As an organization, we are funding groceries, $50 to $75, for students to not, go hungry at night. So I don't understand where they'll be able to get this 1 lakh rupee amount. But beyond that, let's also think about the statement and the procedures that are being in place. There's no mention of students specifically in their priorities. And I don't understand that. Coming from a perspective that represents students, is that young people now, and students I'm using as a general term for J1 and F1 visa holders, are homeless. They're without food. So why are they not being prioritized? And I understand where the government is coming from, because if you think about it, let's assume 50, 60, 75% of the 250 to 300,000 people were able to make it back to India, or they found a place, right? Let's say 50, 60, 70, whatever. That's still, 50, 60,000 people, students that are here homeless. And we have to be, cognizant of that.
Right.
And that's really important to highlight.
All right. Well, let's hope as many students as possible and others are able to actually come back to India now that these flights are opening up. But thank you all very much for making these points, and hopefully you'll be with your loved ones sooner than later, though at this rate it could still take a couple of months given the demand that actually exists. Thank you all very much for being with us.